A routine traffic stop took a shocking turn when this cop learned who he was messing with. The late afternoon sun cast a golden hue over the quiet streets of a suburban neighborhood in Fairview Heights, Missouri. Angela Carter, a polished and composed woman in her early 40s, was driving home from a work meeting. Her car, a sleek black Tesla, glided effortlessly down the road. It was one of those moments where she felt grateful for how far she'd come. But the tranquil drive took a sharp turn as red and blue lights suddenly flashed in her rearview mirror. The unmistakable sound of a siren pierced through her thoughts. Angela's heart rate spiked, not from fear, but from frustration. She had done nothing wrong. Checking her speedometer, she confirmed she was well below the limit. Still, she signaled, pulled over to the side, and took a deep breath. The patrol car rolled to a stop behind her. Officer Dan Baker stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder as he approached her vehicle. Tall and broad-shouldered, he carried himself with an air of authority. His gaze was hard, his lips set in a thin line. Angela pressed the button to roll down her window, her expression calm but alert. Before she could say anything, the officer leaned down, peering into the car with an intensity that made her grip the steering wheel just a little tighter. "License and registration," he said curtly, his tone clipped and devoid of any courtesy. Angela retrieved her documents, her movements measured. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" Her voice was steady, professional. He narrowed his eyes. "I'll be asking the questions here. Step out of the vehicle." There was no explanation, no context. Angela hesitated, not out of defiance, but because she knew the law. There was no reason for her to step out, and he hadn't provided one. Her pause seemed to irritate him further. "I said step out of the vehicle," he barked, his voice rising enough to turn a few heads from passers-by. Angela locked eyes with him. She wasn't about to give in so easily, but she knew this was just the beginning. Her silence left the air heavy, making it clear this encounter was far from over. Angela's composed demeanor seemed to irritate Officer Baker even more. His hand rested on the holster of his gun, not drawing it, but enough to send a clear message. The subtle gesture wasn't lost on Angela, but she refused to let it shake her. Instead, she maintained her calm, unflinching gaze. "Officer, I'm happy to comply if you can provide a valid reason for asking me to step out," she said firmly, her voice steady and measured. His jaw tightened as he leaned closer to the window. "You're acting suspicious. This is my call, and I don't have to explain myself to you." The dismissiveness in his tone was almost as loud as the authority he was trying to project. Angela exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to escalate the situation. Instead, she unlocked her car door and stepped out, standing tall despite the officer's intimidating stance. She wore a navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, her appearance immaculate. If Baker noticed, he didn't seem to care. "Hands where I can see them," he ordered, stepping back slightly as if expecting her to make a sudden move. Angela complied, raising her hands slightly, though the gesture felt both unnecessary and humiliating. A small crowd had started to gather at a distance, their murmurs growing louder. "You're driving an expensive car in an area where we don't see too many visitors," he added, letting the implication hang in the air. Angela's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "Are you saying I don't belong here?" Baker smirked, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'm saying it's my job to make sure everything checks out." "Where are you headed, ma'am?" "Home," she replied simply. "I live here." The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Is that so? Care to prove it?" Angela opened her mouth to respond, but a woman from the crowd shouted, "Leave her alone! She hasn't done anything!" Baker turned sharply, glaring at the onlookers. "Mind your own business." His voice was harsh, his frustration beginning to show. Angela seized the moment. "Officer, I'd like to remind you that I'm fully cooperating, but your behavior is inappropriate and unprofessional. If you have nothing further, I'd like to go." His face reddened, a mix of embarrassment and anger. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near growl. You don't tell me how to do my job. But Angela wasn't backing down. The tension in the air was electric, and everyone watching could sense that this encounter was heading toward an inevitable breaking point. Angela didn't flinch under Baker's simmering glare. She had dealt with men like him before, men who thought authority gave them the right to belittle and intimidate. But she also knew the power of remaining composed. Every word, every gesture, every moment of silence was a choice. And right now, Angela chose to let Baker dig his own hole. "Officer," she began, her voice calm but edged with steel. "I'm well aware of my rights. Unless you have probable cause or evidence that I've committed an offense, you have no grounds to detain me." Her words were measured, deliberate. The gathered crowd murmured in approval, emboldened by her confidence. Baker, however, looked like a kettle about to boil over. He straightened his stance, trying to regain the upper hand. "I don't need a lecture on the law from you," he snapped. "You think you can talk your way out of this because you're—" He stopped himself, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Angela tilted her head slightly, her expression unchanging. "Because I'm what, officer? Educated? Successful? Black?" The last word landed like a thunderclap. A hush fell over the small crowd as Baker's face darkened. He opened his mouth to respond, but Angela didn't give him the chance. "You should know," she continued, her tone unwavering, "that I have no problem escalating this if necessary. This encounter is being documented." She gestured subtly toward the discreet dashcam mounted on her windshield. Baker's eyes flicked toward the camera, his bravado faltering for the first time. "You can't intimidate me," he muttered, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "I'm not trying to intimidate you," Angela replied, her tone soft but firm. "I'm trying to hold you accountable." For a moment, it seemed as though Baker might back off. His eyes darted between Angela, the camera, and the watching crowd. But his pride wouldn't let him. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "You're playing a dangerous game," he warned, his voice low enough that only Angela could hear. She didn't move, didn't blink. "And so are you." The weight of her words hung heavy between them. Baker's hand twitched at his side, his confidence visibly cracking. But Angela knew the storm wasn't over yet. She could see it brewing in his restless eyes. The air felt dense with tension as Baker stared at Angela, his ego battling with the reality that his authority was slipping away. Angela remained steadfast, her gaze unwavering. The crowd, though silent, seemed to hum with anticipation. It was a moment balanced on the edge of a knife, and Angela knew it was time to tip the scales. "Officer Baker," she began, her voice cutting through the silence like a bell. "Do you know who I am?" Baker sneered, masking his unease with defiance. "I don't care who you are." Angela took a small step closer, her calmness unnerving. "You should. I'm Angela Carter, the head of internal affairs for the state of Missouri." Her words hit like a thunderclap, their weight reverberating through the small crowd. Gasps rippled through the onlookers, and even Baker's face betrayed a flicker of panic before he masked it with a forced scowl. "You're lying," he said, though his voice faltered. Angela didn't flinch. "Feel free to verify it. Call your station. Pull up my credentials. I oversee the conduct of every officer in this state, including you." Baker's bravado cracked like thin ice under pressure. He took a step back, his mind racing, but his body betrayed his disbelief. His hand dropped from his holster as he shifted awkwardly, suddenly aware of the cameras, the crowd, and the damning nature of his behavior. Angela didn't stop. "This entire interaction has been recorded," she said, her voice calm but with an edge of authority that demanded attention. "Your actions will be reviewed, your conduct scrutinized, and I will personally ensure that justice is served." Baker's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He had no clever comeback, no way to regain control of the situation. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone watching could see it. One of the bystanders, a young man with his phone raised, shouted, "Yeah, you better listen to her." The crowd murmured in agreement, emboldened by Angela's quiet strength. Baker took another step back, now visibly sweating. I didn't mean any disrespect," he stammered, his tone suddenly conciliatory. Angela raised an eyebrow. "Your actions say otherwise, officer. I suggest you reflect on that." For the first time, Baker looked small, his earlier arrogance replaced by a palpable discomfort. Angela didn't gloat, didn't revel in his humiliation. Instead, she turned her attention to the crowd. "You all can go home now," she said gently. "There's nothing more to see here." The onlookers began to disperse, but not without a few parting glances at Baker, whose shoulders sagged under the weight of his own actions. Angela watched as he retreated to his car, but she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a much-needed reckoning. Officer Baker sat in his patrol car, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, his mind racing through the events that had just unfolded. He could still feel the weight of Angela Carter's words pressing against him. "I oversee the conduct of every officer in this state, including you." The sentence played over and over in his head, each repetition chipping away at the confidence he had clung to earlier. Angela stood by her car, waiting patiently as Baker fumbled with his radio, likely confirming her identity. She didn't need to listen in to know the outcome. The quiet resolve in her posture made it clear. She had been through far more challenging battles than this, and she had no intention of letting this one slide. Minutes later, Baker exited his vehicle, his once commanding demeanor now subdued. He approached Angela with his head slightly lowered, the confidence he had carried earlier replaced by something closer to shame. "Ms. Carter," he began hesitantly, "I've spoken to my superiors. I understand who you are now." Angela met his gaze, her expression calm but firm. "Good. Then you understand the gravity of what just happened." Baker nodded stiffly. I apologize if I overstepped." Angela tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Overstepped? Officer, what you did wasn't a simple overstep. It was an abuse of power, rooted in bias and intimidation. Do you even realize how dangerous your actions could have been?" Baker opened his mouth to respond, but quickly shut it again. The weight of her words seemed to sink in, and for the first time he looked genuinely uncomfortable. Angela continued, her voice unwavering. "As an officer of the law, you're sworn to protect and serve. Yet today, you chose to profile and harass. Imagine if I hadn't been in the position I'm in. Imagine if I had been someone without the means or knowledge to defend themselves." Baker's shoulders slumped, the realization of his actions crashing down on him. He looked down at the ground, unable to meet her eyes. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I was wrong." Angela nodded. "Acknowledging your mistake is a start, but it's not enough. You need to reflect on why you acted the way you did and take steps to change. This isn't just about you, it's about the system you represent." The crowd had long since dispersed, leaving the two of them standing there in the fading light of the afternoon. Baker nodded again, his voice almost a whisper. "I'll do better." Angela stepped back toward her car, opening the driver's side door. "I'll be watching to make sure you do. And believe me, Officer Baker, I'll hold you accountable if you don't." As she slid into her seat, Baker remained rooted to the spot, the full weight of the moment settling on him. Angela drove off, leaving behind a man who now had to face not only the consequences of his actions, but the deeper flaws within himself. As Angela drove home, the tension of the encounter slowly began to dissipate. She glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror, her expression steady but thoughtful. This wasn't the first time she had faced discrimination, and it likely wouldn't be the last. But today felt different. Today, she hadn't just defended herself, She had sent a message that accountability wasn't optional. Back at the precinct, Officer Baker sat alone in the break room, replaying every word Angela had said. Her calm authority had shaken him in a way he didn't expect. For years he had operated under assumptions, never questioning the biases that guided his actions. But now, he couldn't ignore the harsh reality staring back at him. His badge didn't make him right, and his power wasn't an excuse to demean others. Angela's words echoed in his mind. Imagine if I hadn't been in the position I'm in. Imagine if I had been someone without the means or knowledge to defend themselves. He realized how often his decisions could have caused harm, and for the first time, he felt a genuine desire to do better, not out of fear, but out of responsibility. Meanwhile, Angela parked in her driveway and stepped out, the evening breeze brushing against her face. She paused, looking up at the sky as stars began to dot the horizon. Her work was far from over, but she felt a sense of purpose. Change didn't come all at once, and progress was often messy. Still, moments like this reminded her why she fought so hard to challenge injustice. Her story wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been silenced, overlooked, or underestimated. Angela knew the power of speaking up, of standing firm, and of holding others accountable, no matter how uncomfortable it made them. As she walked inside, a sense of determination fueled her steps. This wasn't just a battle she had won, it was a step toward something greater. Her encounter with Baker would ripple through the precinct and beyond, a reminder that justice was more than a word. It was an action. In the end, the lesson was clear. True power isn't in authority, it's in accountability. And justice, no matter how delayed, always has its moment. If this story moved you, don't let the conversation end here. Share this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us all of the power we hold to make a difference.